little bit before it's not going to break.
Okay.
All right.
Welcome to the About podcast. Here we explore your financial health in simple and easy to understand ways.
Yes, greetings. Welcome to the About podcast. My name is Jeremy Scott, one of your hosts here. And of course, with us is Roy, Hooky Like Cookie. Roy, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And we do have a special guest with us today, which is becoming a bit of a habit for us. I really like it.
It's kind of fun.
It's kind of fun.
It's kind of my preferred way of doing it.
It is. It is. So, all right. So today we got Sandy McMillan here with us today. She's founder and president of Andagio Destinations.
Andagio.
Andagio.
It's Italian. It's Italian.
It's a made-up word.
Oh, it's a made-up word.
It is.
So it's just made up to sound Italian.
Well, no, it's the combination of two Italian words. Andare, to go, viaggio, travel. To go travel.
To go travel. All right.
Andagio.
Well, that works. That's work. Well, she is the president of
Andagio.
Andagio Destinations, which is a full-service travel company here in Colorado, up north of us here in Windsor. Published author as well, and no doubt done extensive travel.
Yep.
As you were just sharing, just got back from the great state of Hawaii.
I did.
I remember my grandma was of the generation that she used to complain that Hawaii was a state. She really didn't like that Hawaii was. I didn't realize that it was controversial that Hawaii was a state because it's always been a state as long as I've been around.
Right.
But according to my grandma, it was still controversial.
I could see
Really?
that.
Yeah. She's like, I don't know why we did that. And I'm like, okay. Well, Grandma, nobody asked me or you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, full disclosure here on how I know Sandy is I actually knocked on her door about, 12, 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Like that.
Long time. Yeah.
And just introduced myself to her.
Oh, okay.
That's how I originally met her. And then have developed a friendship over years, and it's been fun to actually see your business grow. And
Yeah.
you have a really fun story, and that's actually why I wanted to have you on too, to talk about. You went from your work life to what you're doing now. I'd like to hear about that.
Okay.
Because I think it's very intriguing and interesting and fun. And that's what it's all about, is having fun in life, right?
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about the corporate background that you had. Maybe walk us into that.
Sure. So I actually worked for Verizon Wireless at the time, corporate, and I managed their sales for government agency in northern Colorado and Wyoming for many, many years. And then from that, I earned my master's degree in adult education, so moved into their learning and development and managed the learning and development team for their business sales organization. And that's where I finished my career with them. But in 2013, I also published a book in the background called Extraordinary Travels of an Ordinary Couple. And it's a story about my husband and I and the travels we've taken and how we've been able to do some really unique and fun things, but always as an ordinary couple. And once that book was published, I went out and did book signings and so forth. And people kept calling me and contacting me and saying, how do I do what you've done? How do I do this? How do I go on these trips like you did? And I told my husband, I love travel. I love travel planning. So I'm going to prepare for retirement in the background, and I'm going to become a certified travel planner, and I'm going to open my own business. This was in 2014 that I opened my business, and I opened it part-time in the background. And so it came busier and busier and busier and busier, and I was continuing to work at Verizon. And in 2019, Verizon came out, and they offered all of us who'd been there for over 20 years an early retirement package. And my business was so busy that I thought, it's time. So I followed their lead. I raised my hand and said, pick me. And they did. And it was really, truly a gift from God. So I was able to retire and moved full-time into being a small business owner, which in itself presented a lot of challenges because, as you guys know, shortly thereafter came 2020.
Yeah, didn't do great things for the travel industry.
Did not do great things for the travel industry. And I found myself doing more consoling of clients, talking them off ledges, helping them figure out how to pick up the broken pieces of all of their ideas and their travel plans, and kind of spent a year being what I call a bit of a travel psychiatrist, right? Helping people figure out, how do I put this back together when the world comes out?
Sure, because I mean, people had like dream vacations planned for that summer, or anniversaries, or whatever. I know it was our 20th wedding anniversary, and we're like, I guess we're hanging out at home.
Yep, exactly. A lot of staycations.
Well, and the emotion behind that, right? Like, I just had a client tell me this week, and they've been saving for a long time for this. It was pretty fun to celebrate with them that they booked their trip, right? And it's 2 years out, though.
Yeah.
Right? It's that big of a trip that they're doing, and so if you did this in 2018 and then 2020 comes along, you're crushed, right?
Oh,
you are just crushed because you had all this hope and excitement behind it, and now you just couldn't do it, and you didn't know what was going to happen. So I completely understand the consoling piece.
Exactly. So, that was a rough year for the business, obviously, but the good thing was all the clients, we recovered as a world, and the clients came back, and we started putting their pieces back together and sent them back out again for their fun and their trips and making those great memories that they wanted. And actually it came back with a vengeance. I call it kind of COVID revenge travel, because everybody came out of the woodwork and said, I am not going to be locked up anymore. And boom, the travel it just went crazy. So I ended up hiring some assistants, which has been probably the best thing ever. And it's just exploding.
So 2 questions. Number 1, you made it through 2020.
Mm-hmm.
How? What did you guys do to survive? Because it was crazy when you launched a business in 2019, full time, right? And you shared that with me, and I was super excited for you. But then I saw what happened. So how did you guys make it mentally and financially, and how did you guys get through it?
Well, so mentally, I probably cried a lot, but I prayed a lot.
Not alone. A lot of people did a lot of crying and a lot of praying, I can promise you.
A lot of praying, and just saying, Lord, you put us here. I know you brought me here. I have to just have faith that you're going to move us through this business. We had been kind of planning for me to retire and do this as a retirement position anyway. Okay. So we didn't look at it at that point in time as part of our financial plan. It was really just to support our own travel and something fun to do in the background, because I can't sit still. So that was actually a good year for me, though, in the sense that it made me learn to sit still, learn to sit back a little bit, and really gave me time, though, to put some thought process around the business, because I had just hit the ground running so fast. So in 2020, I actually realized it was more of a blessing for me, because I could step back and reprogram my business model, rebrand my business, which is where I came out with the Andagio name, rebrand my whole plan and model, and rethink what I wanted to focus on and where I wanted to go with the business. So I took it to that perspective. Financially, the business had no debt. So that wasn't an issue necessarily.
No payroll yet.
No payroll, because I didn't have anybody on staff with me. It was just me. So we were okay from that perspective. But I didn't want to let that dream die. I just felt God had led me there, and I wasn't willing to let it die. So instead, I stepped back and used that year as thought process.
Got to regroup and hit the ground running.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what you got to do. And I mean, I think there are those who used COVID as the opportunity to say, all right, what can I do now that I could do before I've got all this time?
Right.
And those who didn't. Even in my line of work, I've got colleagues, fellow pastors, and that was an interesting time for a lot of us, because some of us took it as the chance to be like, well, we got to rethink everything. Let's rethink everything and figure out what we can do, and reinvest in technology and all this kind of stuff. And there are those who just kind of sat around and complained the whole time. So
it's always interesting, the parallels with Jeremy and myself, being a pastor and a financial planner, and then a small business owner as you are. We're doing the same things, right?
Yep.
Running a business is really what you're doing with the church.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of my pastoral care at that time was people who, had plans, whether it was, somebody's graduation or, anniversary trips or whatever. A lot of them involved travel and going places and not being able to be there when kids are born and, that kind of stuff. And, I don't think we realize like how mobile a world we live in until we can't be mobile anymore.
Exactly.
And it's not that it's cheap necessarily, but especially those of us around here who are blessed to live so close to DIA, the major, or any kind of major airport, it's really not that bad. I mean, you can pretty much get where you want to go when you want to get there for a amount of money that a reasonable person doing some reasonable saving can do.
Absolutely.
I mean, it just feels like travel is so much more attainable.
Yeah.
Clearly now than any point ever in human history. I mean, let's be honest, it's never been easier for humans to move than it is right now. So we talk about that on Sundays all the time when I'm talking about, stories from the Bible and stuff. I'm like, now remember, when these people are traveling, they're walking.
They're walking.
I mean, they're walking. They might have a donkey, but the donkey's carrying their stuff. They're walking.
Yeah.
When they're wandering the desert, they're wandering the desert on their feet, right?
Yeah.
No cars, no trains.
Yeah.
No smartphones.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like when you put your Google Maps on and it accidentally goes to walking and you're like, 12 hours to go 5 miles walking? Wait, what? Oh, that's walking, not driving.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, the people that you serve. How do you get there? I talk about, savings and goals with people all the time, and travel, and, if they're saving for something fun and they want to do it. And a lot of times it is travel. And that's why I thought this would be really fun to talk about with you is, essentially the idea of investing in your own, memories. And that's actually your words. And I think that's a really awesome thing to do. And when people do that, they always come back so excited to share the stories that go with it. So when you're investing in memories, if you have grandkids or even your own children, or even like I don't have any kids or anything, but I took my parents.
Exactly.
Right. So I took my parents to Germany, which you helped me with. I went to New Zealand. I took my mom to Italy.
Right.
And, those are memories that you can't put a price tag on that.
You can't.
But you got to be reasonable. So
Right.
So let's talk about how do you help someone, make a plan to be able to travel.
So let me back up just a quick bit.
Sure.
I told you about the book, Ordinary Couples is the tagline, right? Ordinary Couple Travels. And I start that book by prefacing and telling people we are just an ordinary couple with an ordinary life and an ordinary income. We don't have massive amounts of income. We both have normal jobs. We both worked our jobs. We both saved from our jobs. We had 4 children that we had a lot of orthodontic bills for, and, all those other things that go along with raising a family. But for us, it was always a priority to travel. So travel for us could be as simple or as complicated as even a weekend in Denver at a hotel with a pool. Right. To the kids, that was an adventure. So, I remind my clients when they call and they talk about what their plans and their dreams are. I like them to dream big. I like them to talk to me and explain to me all of their vision and all of their dreams. Then we do have to talk about that budget.
Right.
Now, I'll be honest, a lot of people will say, don't ask about budget. And I think, absolutely not. You have to ask about budget because we have to be realistic. You can have the dreams, and I encourage them, but let's make them happen within the budget that you really have, because you don't want to go in debt just for this trip. At least I would not encourage that. So for me, it's a lot about spending time talking. Tell me your dreams, tell me your visions. And a lot of times they don't necessarily equate to, well, I have to stay in a 5-star resort. I don't advocate staying in a cheap place. Trust me, I don't. Been there, done that. But you can get, I know a lot of good places all over Europe. You can get good hotels in good locations at good prices, especially if you go off season. So I talked to them about how do you maximize your budget? How do you travel on that budget? What are the things you want to see, and how do you do that? Public transportation is a big part if you're really on a tight budget. We're not going to get private drivers. But you have to be willing to understand that you're getting on a train. And what is that? You have to be flexible. So a lot of it just comes down to what can the client afford, and how can I take what they can afford and match it to their dream so that they don't come out feeling like they just took a very cheap trip, and that's what it was, or that they just took a trip that they just couldn't afford and now they're covered in debt.
Yep.
So it's really important.
Or they forget about those little things like the extra costs that are involved that every trip has, right?
Yep. So we start with the big dreams, and then we scale them back to what they can afford. Now, that being said, I do a lot of luxury travel too. But even my high-end luxury clients have budgets and expectations. And so it still becomes a matter for me to tie those expectations reasonably into their budgets.
For our listeners that don't understand the difference, what's the difference between just normal travel and luxury travel?
Well, a luxury travel client, I'll give you an example. I have a very good luxury client. She's heading out with her family of 5 on a private yacht in Greece that I've arranged for her. And she's spending time at some of the best resorts on the island of Mykonos after the yacht experience, and some of the best resorts in Athens pre the yacht experience. Now, could she have done all that on a lower budget? Possibly. But that wasn't the experience she wanted. So we needed to make sure that this was a once-in-a-lifetime trip for her daughter's graduation. The whole family's going. They wanted this experience at the ultimate. So I looked to find exactly what she needed and wanted. Private yachts, the best of the, private dinner reservations, all those things that all she does is show up. First class air tickets. Then I have budgets on the opposite extreme. But I tell people you got to be realistic. So you can't give me a 2-star budget and expect a 5-star vacation. But if people are reasonable and willing, depending on the time of year they go and where they go, they can go to Europe for $5,000 or $6,000, including air. It just depends on what people look for.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So luxury is the way I'd like to travel, Jeremy.
Oh, luxury's my favorite, but I don't personally travel luxury.
I don't know. Pastor on a private yacht, that might ask some questions.
Exactly.
Aren't there some like that, though?
No, there's plenty. God bless a lot of people with private planes, apparently. So.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So speaking of those, the travel piece of that, Jeremy, didn't you recently travel?
I did just recently travel.
What was your experience?
Yeah,
and tell us about that a little bit. Huh?
So years and years ago, we decided that when our kids turned 13, we were going to take them somewhere. Because at the time, we were living in Montana. And we were just kind of worried about the kind of isolated existence up there. And I had just read the Steve Jobs biography. And he talked about how he did that with his kids. And I'm like, oh, that's a really great idea. Two things. So when we first moved here, my son, who's almost 19 now, was 13 at the time. So he and my late wife went to Greece because he's really into the Percy Jackson books. And so they did kind of a package tour thing and went there. And I will tell you, I mean, honestly, now, especially now that she's gone, the fact that he and she got to do that. I mean, you talk about making memories, investing in memories. I mean, it was already a super valuable experience, but even more so. And as we were actually in the process of moving, and I was helping to move at his room yesterday, and he found some stuff from that trip. And so we got to talk about it and reminisce and remember and just like all the good feelings and the good times. So, I mean, it was super, super valuable. So then I got our daughter, and she really wanted to go to London, mostly because she's really into Harry Potter. This is how young teens pick things. So we were there. We were there for 11 days. Our trip, though, was really about trying to get into, it's supposed to be more than just a vacation, right? It's supposed to be a little educational, a little cultural. Right. My seminar I went to required us to take these cross-cultural immersion experiences. I spent 2 weeks in India, and we tried to, you can't live the way locals live because you're not a local, but a little closer to that. Right. So when we were in London, we only used public transportation, and we stayed in an Airbnb, in an actual flat instead of a hotel, and so that we could and tried to have as much of a like urban living experience as possible, including people unloading kegs from the pub across the street at like 5 a.m. I swear they were like bouncing them off the concrete. I was like, what is going on? She slept right through. It was great, but yeah. But we had been planning and saving, for that trip for years, which was super valuable because while we're there and you're doing stuff, you're not having to worry so much about money. Like in the back of my head, I know what I've got to spend, and I'm kind of loosely doing the math. And anymore, my bank will tell me how much money I spent. But we didn't really have to worry about that too much, which was wonderful. But there was a point about halfway through when I did turn to her and I'd be like, is this what you wanted? Because I mean, you think you're 5 years. I mean, think about booking a trip 2 years out. Like your client. It's like, that's a lot of time to build up a lot of expectations about that trip. And I was really glad when she's like, oh no, Dad, this is better than I thought. This is so great. I'm like, fantastic. Because you'd really kind of hate for it to be a letdown after that much build up. But, and that's a memory we'll have forever. And we've got, souvenirs and trinkets and, and pictures on the wall and all that kind of stuff, which will be great. But it'll just be one of those things that, we'll always have done. And
that's nice.
And I'm sure it's something that will, anecdotes will come up, for the rest of our lives.
Well, and there's no price that your son could ever put on that experience with his mom.
No.
Nothing.
No. And that's a great lead in because Roy and I talk about that a lot. He's my financial planner, but he knows I travel all the time. It's for my job. Mostly.
air quotes?
Yeah. It's
air
for my
quotes around
job.
that.
There you go.
Which is why I took my financial planner and my accountant with me to Safari
Yes,
Africa.
that's right.
So they could both see that I'm actually working. But regardless of that, I tell people and I remind my clients daily that, there's things we can get back. Money, we could probably get back. We might lose some, and if we're willing to ride the waves, we might be able to get some of that back. But can you ever get back time?
Right.
Can you ever get back those memories or the lack of those memories? How many people at the end of their lives look back and say, wow, I wish I'd invested more money and spent more time at the office. That's an old adage,
Right.
But it's the truth. What they think about, what we think about is how much time did we spend with our family? What did we do together to create memories? That looks like a lot of things, but for most of us and many of us, travel is a huge part of that. Creating those memories, that's an investment in you. That's an investment in your family. And so to me, it's equally as important that my clients receive that return on that investment when I help them plan those trips, so that their ROI definitely comes back and makes it clear that the money they might have spent was well worth the time they invested.
Right.
Yep.
It's interesting how much sometimes in certain aspects of our lives, travel is an expected part of it. Like your honeymoon after you're married.
Yeah.
Or, even like a lot of times the graduation trips, are a thing. So it's like there's something about us that instinctively knows that important things happen when we're away. Right. And that's how we do it. But sometimes I'm not always great about recognizing that everyday trips, the smaller trips, or, sometimes a trip for the sake of a trip,
Exactly.
just to do something. I mean, I think we took one of those like COVID revenge trips,
Yeah.
To Southern California in like 2022 or something like that. I mean, right when you could.
Yep.
Right. And we had to get like, reservations ahead of time for Disney because they weren't just letting everybody in and all that kind of stuff. But it was like, this is nice. It was so nice to be away.
It was nice. I think it's like when you lose the option of having something, you realize later how much you depended on it or enjoyed it or just even took it for advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or how much we complain about our air travel now, but during that period of time, we would have been like, oh, it's okay. It's fine. Just
It's
let me
okay.
go.
I don't care. Just let me get on that plane. I don't care if I'm delayed.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the airports took it as an opportunity to really do some nice work.
Yeah.
When we went I was actually really impressed now when we went to London, how frankly easy it was. I uploaded a picture of my passport. It was almost like boarding a domestic flight, other than 10 minutes on the other end walking through. And though I got through customs, Vivi wanted me to go first, my daughter, and then her passport wouldn't scan. So she had to go in like the
other line,
the loser line where so I'm standing on the other side. And like, you have to move on, sir. And I'm like, no, I don't. My daughter's right there. You let her through here before I move on.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. It's just like.
So I was going to share with you that, I'm actually going to do some travel next week.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to spend some time with my family for the 4th of July.
Uh-huh.
And my dad invited me to go to see, he has a relative that's a cousin that's 100.
Wow. Good for them.
It's in Montana, so that should be
nice.
exciting to you, Jeremy. My dad doesn't ask me a lot for these kinds of things, and it's just like an overnight trip kind of thing. But how many people get that kind of experience? And then it's always those questions you ask yourself that how many opportunities will you actually have to do that with your loved people in your life? And it's kind of a no-brainer for me. There's like, well, sure, I'll just go and experience it. And I actually like to travel with no expectations. Talking about setting up a trip and having expectations. If I ever have expectations, I build things up that aren't reality.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I go into my travel as a way to decompress and just let go and then just take it in.
Yep.
So I'm really not disappointed. Maybe the rainy day in Africa was pretty rough.
That rainy day in Africa was tough. You and I were on the back of the
Didn't
thing
really
getting
enjoy
all of
that.
the spray. It was bad.
But, you take the good with the bad, right?
Yeah,
So, and then you
you
laugh
do.
about it now because but that day we would probably not
We weren't
about
laughing.
it.
No.
No, but it's a story.
It's a story.
It's a story. It's a story that you two have, and you will, always have that.
Yeah.
I mean, friends, family, whoever it is. It's we took a road trip in college to Southern California for spring break once, and 5 of us in this tiny little car. And anytime I'm around any of those people, I guarantee you it won't take more than 10 minutes before something from that trip came up, because it was nothing bad happened. It doesn't or anything like that. It was just full of like anecdotes. You're just like, oh yeah, that made me smile. So
Well, you talk about your son getting that opportunity to travel with your wife who's since passed. I operate a women's travel division as well. And the reason I started the women's travel division was because I had so many women contacting me and asking about traveling with other like-minded women, with small groups. Maybe they're single, maybe their husbands don't want to go, whatever that looked like. And I started to realize, man, there's really a need for women to be able to travel together.
Yeah.
So I was out in Costa Rica a couple of years ago, and I was really pondering, gosh, what would I do with this travel division for women? What would I call it? How would I mold it? How would I market that? And I literally was really thinking about it and praying about it, and I felt God say, honor thy mother. I thought, what? Honor thy mother. Let me think about that for a minute. What does that mean? My mother passed away at 44. I was 24. We never got to travel. She always talked about those vacations she would take when she retired. She wanted to go to Hawaii. That was her big thing. I'm going to Hawaii when I retire. But of course, that never materialized, and it never happened. And suddenly I realized God was calling me to name my women's travel division Patricia, after my mother. And so I started doing some research on that name, Patricia, and a version of it in Greek means noble. And then it suddenly dawned on me, Patricia, noble women traveling together. So again, I launched that farm of my business, and it's just exploded as well. Women traveling with their daughters, their mothers, their sisters, their friends. And so in August, I'm taking 32 women on a cruise in Greece through the Greek islands.
Are you going?
Nice.
Oh, of course. I go on all of them. My daughter comes. My granddaughter comes. All of that is a legacy and a memory to my mom, who never got to go or do these things. But I feel like, giving her that legacy and this division, that naming, helps me to carry her memory through. And I think she's probably pretty pleased to see that we're out there doing these things and exploring.
That's awesome.
I think that's great. Well, I think there's a lot of specialty need in travel, and some people, if are comfortable doing stuff, some people aren't. So being able to do it together, makes a lot of sense. And I was just thinking, my fiance now has done the Pilgrim Trail in Spain.
The Camino de...
Is that the one you walk?
The Camino de Santiago.
Yeah, the one you walk.
Yeah, I actually have a friend here in town that
I
just
want to
did
do that.
Her husband did that.
Yeah. We did that movie, The Way.
The Way. Excellent movie.
A couple years ago in our movie series, and great movie. Yeah. And she had done that. But again, it's another one of those things. It's just like, and it was her and some girlfriends and mostly other clergy who went and did this thing together, and it's just a shared experience and all that. But even that idea of pilgrimage, this idea that there's more to this than just entertainment.
Absolutely.
Right. That and that there's in the going and in the doing, something happens in that, and there's this extra layer there that it can be meaningful beyond just like, there was a great buffet.
No, I agree.
And I don't mind a great buffet.
No, I'll always take a great buffet.
But you don't really have to go far if you don't want to find a great buffet.
Yeah.
Well, and the pilgrimage aspect is a smart one too. Last summer, I assisted a church in Fort Collins with doing a World Youth Day pilgrimage, taking the youth from their church. There was 44 youth, and the priests and some of the staff members and parents, and they did a pilgrimage through Spain and Portugal, culminating with the World Youth Day in Lisbon, Portugal. But the church did the fundraising for them. Parents pitched in, but again, they saw the value of spending that money on these youth and leaving a lasting impression for them of the holy sites in Spain and Lisbon, and of course meeting or at least observing the Pope and what he was doing for World Youth Day. So there's a lot of investments that even from a religious perspective that we can make in travel that brings us better and makes us more aware of our culture and our history and our religion.
Yeah, we have a mission team right now from our church that's in upstate New York.
Okay.
And they're doing great work, and they're coming back tomorrow. And they're doing great work there. And one of sometimes the critiques is like, well, they're not doing anything they really couldn't do here. And I'm like, no, you're not wrong. I'm like, absolutely. Like the good work is part of it.
Yep.
It's also the getting away from here. It's being somewhere new. It's, part of it is sleeping on the floor of a church on an uncomfortable mattress. It's all the experience of it. And I've never seen or been part of, that kind of, go and do experience, especially amongst young people where one, if not more, of the kids weren't, deeply affected.
Absolutely.
I had one case, literally, I brought a different kid back. His parents were like, "What did you do to my child?" And I'm like, "I locked him in a van with 13 teenage girls for a week."
Ooh,
yeah,
nothing
untoward happened, but man, he came out of the shell.
not.
He was pretty quiet before, but he was not quiet when he got done with that experience, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" But it couldn't have happened anywhere else. It couldn't have happened any way else. I mean, we could have gone to a different city, but we needed to leave. We needed to go. We needed to do stuff.
Yeah, experience the differences that exist out there that as youth we just don't know about.
Exactly.
It's like you're taking your kids on your trips. And that's a big deal, a really big deal. So I was actually talking to a client recently, and they, it was funny. He said this. I know I talk about this stuff. I didn't remember the specific conversation, but he's like, "You're the first financial advisor we've ever had that encouraged me to spend money." Because he's like, they have their budget and they are very smart with their money, and they teach their kids very good money habits. And I said, "You guys need to take a trip." They hadn't taken a trip in years.
Oh, wow.
Right. They were just working. And they wanted to save for their retirement. It was really important to them. I said, "You guys need to have some fun. Let's have some fun money here." And they did, and they budgeted for it, and they had this specific plan, and I think they went to Disney. And they went, and they didn't really talk to their kids about like how they did it and the savings part of it and stuff. So then the kids, when they got there, the kids weren't sure, because they wanted to be frugal with their money, right? And they're like, no. See, we budgeted for this.
Right.
You can have what you want.
Right.
And it's okay because we saved for this so that we could do this.
Right.
And they had a blast of a time. The kids actually got, they went hog wild, of course, after that, right? And had a great time. They were all within the numbers that they needed to be within. And, that's a memory. That experience of them working so hard to get to that point, to then be able to do it, to then take your kids there, and then to say to your kids, "Hey, let's go. Let's have fun. It's all paid for. Don't worry about anything."
Vivi asked me a couple of times, they're like, "God, is this okay?" And I'm like, "Honey, literally 5 years of planning and saving and, all that kind of stuff, so that we didn't have to worry about whether the churro was $5 or $6, or pounds or whatever." So, though we caught it right because the pound was really good.
Then
going this way.
You did get a good one.
I wouldn't want to be coming here from there, but the dollar was pretty strong. So we were doing okay.
In the travel business, there's a book I read recently, but what it talks about is the go-go years that we experience, right? When we're middle age or whatever that might be, where we've got the energy to go, we've got the capacity to go, but we're also working really hard, like you talked about with those clients. And then there's the slow go years, which I suppose I'm approaching, but I'm not ready to do that yet. So I'm going to say I'm still in the go-go.
Just avoid that.
But the slow go, maybe folks 60s, 70s, whatever that looks like for them, where they can go, but they're going to go a little slower than they did before. And then we ultimately end up in the no-go years. Right. And I think most all of us end up in the no-go years, hopefully, or at some point when we're done traveling. So while I really respect and appreciate that people want to work for those slow-go years, maybe we need to rethink that and put some of that aside for our go-go years, too. Go, take advantage. Do the things you can do. It doesn't have to be over the top. But do what you can do physically, emotionally, financially, because we don't have that guarantee that we're going to have the next year or the next phase or the retirement phase. So I do encourage my clients, that are saving, well, I can't do that till I retire. Why not?
Yep. Right. Well, and I had a client that, unfortunately, his wife passed away right before retirement. And he had retired already, but she was like a year behind him.
Yep.
Got an aggressive form of cancer, passed away. And never had a chance to do anything together.
My mother.
So that's one of those things where I do, and I learn a lot of lessons from clients, and it's from their life lessons that I've seen these things where that's why I do what I do. Like I want to travel, I want to work hard because I like what I do, and I want to do a good job for my clients, but I want to also play hard.
Yep.
So when I go to Africa with your group of misfits, we had so much fun and the great memories to go that. Then you go play hard. Right? Just go have a good time.
Exactly.
And that's a really important piece of this whole concept is that we have to live today, but plan for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And and then kind of playing off that, did you have something on that?
No.
Okay. Playing off that, I'm curious because we're just talking about the Africa thing, and what is What is like the best part of travel that you've experienced, and what's like the worst part of travel?
No, so not necessarily destination.
No,
just part.
Yeah,
the best part of travel to me, the best part. I enjoy the cultures. I enjoy the uniqueness of a destination. I like learning about the destination, learning about the lifestyles, the cultures. Really immersing in that. Sometimes it's awkward and uncomfortable. I'm kind of thinking of that street day in Nairobi where, you're out of your comfort zone a little bit.
That was the day I missed.
Oh, you missed that day. But it was a good experience. There was nothing negative that happened that day. It's good. I like to push myself outside of my comfort zone. Not in an unsafe manner, obviously, but just to recognize and realize that the world is so vast and so different, and not everything functions just like we might think it does.
Yeah, our ideas aren't king.
Exactly. Yeah. It's good to open our hearts and our minds to really explore the destination. And it doesn't have to be as far away as Nairobi. It can be as close as going to
downtown Denver.
Yeah.
The southern states have some different foods and cultures than maybe the western states. Just to me, it's the openness of your heart to see it and experience it. What was the next part of that question, Roy?
The worst part of travel.
Ooh, the worst part. Coming home. Yeah. Honestly, I don't mind the plane rides. People say to me, my goodness, how do you sit on the plane that long? And I always fly economy. I don't fly coach, I don't fly first class. I always fly coach. And it's like, I don't mind because I know I'm getting there. But you know what I really enjoy? I can turn off my devices. Mm-hmm. I can shut everything down for several hours. And I have an actual good excuse to sit there and quietly read a book, do some thoughts and jot down notes about the business, watch a movie that, I haven't had time to watch. I actually kind of like it. I'm starting to reframe my idea around sitting on an airplane as actually quality time for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way, honestly. I don't fly near as I used to fly every week for work back in the day when I was in corporate. And it can be a bit of a grind if you're just literally, it feels like riding the bus after a while.
Right.
But anymore, it's so infrequent. You're just like, you're right. Like, take the excuse. Like, great, I can't possibly. Honestly, when they're like, you can instant message now from the airplane if you're a T-Mobile customer.
Oh, yeah. No, that's okay.
Sorry, it didn't work. It was broken. So, but I like that. I like that opportunity. Yeah. I think that's a smart way to look at it. So I think one of the challenges I think people have around this is kind of finding a way in their head to calculate the ROI on it. Mm-hmm. What is the return on investment on travel? It's easier when you're socking away money, for retirement, because it's a dollar sign. We pretty much more is better, and so it's like, how well are we doing? And there's benchmarks and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's one of the things you got to do a little thinking on your own. It's like, okay, well, what is the return on investment on this travel and these experiences, and how do I maximize it? So I'm going to go, I'm going to spend this money, like maybe find a way to not be grumpy about the flight on the way there.
Right.
Make that fun too. Like soak everything you can out of the experience, because for me, that's the ultimate determination of whether it's a good experience or a bad experience is almost always my attitude.
Absolutely.
We live in such an easy, connected, society right now. It's not that things can't go catastrophically wrong, and it stinks when you get, your flight gets canceled or, you have to go through all that stuff. But it's usually almost always the mindset, whether you go in and decide to embrace the experience or not, and the whole of it. And yeah, it may be a little harder and you're getting dumped on in the back of a Jeep, but Well,
actually, it's funny. I have a funny story on that in regards to your mindset and how you frame it, right? Because when we went to Africa, Sandy recommended we do a day up on the front end just in case, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you get there to kind of acclimate a little bit. And,
sure.
Well, so I'm flying out of Denver, noon flight, and I needed to be to Dallas by my 8 o'clock flight or something like that.
Yeah.
And
I remember this.
Yes. And so what happened was we got on the plane ready to take off, and then they had to deplane us.
Oh.
Like, what's going on? And you know how airlines are with communication.
Yeah.
That's one of their biggest faults, I think, is just they don't communicate what's going on. But I found out after the fact that there was actually a dead body on the plane that was being transported. and it had shifted and the seal broke and there was fluids that got all over the plane.
Oh.
And that's why we had to get off the plane, right?
Ouch.
Okay, so fine, get off the plane. Well, again, I only need to be in Dallas by 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., whatever time the flight was. And I could not get from Denver to Dallas that day, no matter what I did.
Oh.
All the flights were full, and then there was thunderstorms in Dallas, and you couldn't get into Dallas because of lightning. And so anyway, so I ended up spending a whole day at Denver airport. And then I ended up having to get a hotel because you're like, do you get someone to come pick you up, take you back home, or do you just stay in the airport? So I had to stay in Denver and then flew in the next day to Dallas, caught my connecting flight, got into Nairobi, and then I think I got there like 1 a.m. or something like that. And then we were leaving at like 6 or
6 a.m.
Like so I'm like, no problem. I set my alarm, whatever. Nope, nothing. I didn't wake up. She's
I'm
like
calling his room.
me. What's going on?
Roy, are you alive?
I'm waking up. I'm like throwing stuff in my bag. I don't know where I'm at. And it was comical. But that was the experience, right? So that's not really the relaxing, disconnecting experience you're looking for. But you just roll with it, and you don't have any control of it. And still, that's the mentality I have, is that you just don't control it. And that's why I like travel so much. And I like the memories from travel, because I feel like I'm less, your day-to-day life, you're like so regimented and routine, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this. And travel, it's just like, roll with the punches, roll with the flow.
Yeah.
What comes. It's like, we're drinking coffee in Nairobi, and where were we at? That was in Kenya, but they had grounds in the coffee.
Oh, yeah.
That's how they make their coffee. Yeah. I didn't know that. So you kind of have an experience. You like got coffee grounds in the bottom of your coffee cup, and you're just sipping the top of it. That's just how it's done.
That's just how it's done.
So they didn't have the filters and stuff. So they just like, that's how we make our coffee. Right? It was a remote, place
Figure
you're
out how
at.
to filter it through your teeth.
But those fun things are like, you're like, well, this isn't that good of an experience in regards to drinking my coffee, but it's still kind of fun because you're like, wow. Yeah. Who would make their coffee like this nowadays? Like, it's called cowboy coffee here in the U.S.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, I love stuff like that. Anytime you can get into the culture of places, you're doing okay. And then, usually getting there, going back. When we came, I was in Africa and Angola years ago, and coming back, we had 5 flights coming back, and just a little rat trap airline down in Angola. And we got all the way to Denver. And then there was a snowstorm, and they canceled our flight to Billington. So it's just like, I got all the way to Denver. So I'm sitting in a hotel room overnight in Denver, waiting. I'm like, all right, well, at least I can, take a nice hot shower, get some food I understand.
You're back in the States,
and
kind of acclimate for a day before I get home. I'm like, you make the best of it.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, you made a comment about coming home is like the worst part for you. What's funny about that is like, we're coming home to Colorado.
Yeah, I know.
It's like many people's destination.
Right.
So I always am kind of bummed too, like you're saying, but I'm always like, I like going home.
Yeah. Well, that is exactly
true.
Mountains
right.
And I have a little excerpt in my book about that. We love to travel, but coming home and landing and looking out to the west and seeing those mountains, I'm like, nope, this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate place that I'm supposed to be.
It's not like we're going home to Nebraska or anything.
I know. Right?
and I think when I say coming home, it isn't a disappointment in being here, because I love my home. Love it. It's just the disappointment that, it's over.
The adventure's over.
The adventure's over, but that's okay, because I generally have another one planned a couple weeks later.
Yes, you do. You're all over the place for work.
It's all work. Absolutely. So all work, no play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You look very dull. I can see that.
We live a very dull life.
Very dull life. So from a financial planning standpoint on this one, Roy, for me, it feels as simple as having it in the savings. So like, I pay my car insurance every 6 months, but I set aside a little bit every month, so I don't have to pay a huge check out of the blue, and when we planned this London trip, kind of got a ballpark on the budget, what we thought it was going to be, added 20% because we're always under, and then you just figure it out, like put a little bit of money away. And, the big thing is knowing like when things are going to have to happen. Like you're saving up for something, but you've got to buy the plane tickets, 3-4 months out, so you need that big chunk of money then, which actually is kind of nice because by the time we got to London, we'd already paid for our Airbnb. We'd already paid for our plane tickets. Like all the big expensive stuff was behind us. We'd already bought the show tickets and everything behind us. And so it was just like, well, sunk cost, we're in this now. We might as well have fun.
Yeah. I think it's twofold. It's number one, begin with the end in mind, right? Like what's the experience you're looking for? And then the second part of that is if clients of mine haven't done it before, I highly recommend they talk to someone like Sandy because you're highly traveled, right? You understand travel, Jeremy. I'm looking at you, and it's easier for you to set all that up. Well, if you've never traveled, you don't know the things you don't know, and you really need to what's the real cost going to be, right? Two, it's like do I need a car from the airport to my destination or a taxi or like what makes sense? What's the area I'm going to? What's the safest way to do these things? Those are like that's the stuff people don't think about, right? So beginning with the end in mind, figuring out what that budget is, then figure out how you're gonna pay for it. And like these clients that I just told you are doing this trip in 2 years, the wife started a business, a baking business, makes a product and sells it to go 100% towards that trip.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And she has other things too, but she's like, I'm figuring out a way to pay for this trip. Right. So it really comes down to like, how important is it to you really? Right. And, and sometimes it's like, okay, we're willing to sacrifice in this area to do that trip.
Right.
So I have conversations around that because I am a big proponent of live today, but plan for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's not all about saving for tomorrow because we have to enjoy our life today because we just don't know, when it's over. So that's why I take the approach I take, and it keeps me grounded doing that too, personally. Yeah. That's why I live my life that way. Yeah, but that's why I like stuff that Sandy does and makes my life easy when I travel. Yeah. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to plan it. I don't want to check the flights and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do it all.
Well, because I think you make a good point too about reaching out to somebody who knows what they're doing. Because there are kind of simpler things to do, you probably, that most people can do. But if you want to step into the most exotic stuff, I think a lot of keeps people from doing that is they don't know how. Right. And or that it's even possible or, whatever. So I think, that's one of the places we're having somebody around like you Sandy, right? Audio mediums. I know, right? That's where I'm pointing. Is important. And that's what you're for, right?
That's exactly what I'm for.
To add the expertise to it.
Absolutely. And that's what I encourage and remind my clients. You talked about having, every piece put together and paid for before you walk out the door. So my clients have their whole package pulled together. They've got their flights. They've got their transfers. I coach them on their trains. I book their trains, book their hotels because I know for the most part I do mostly customized Europe, but I travel a lot in Europe. So I know the right hotels. In Rome, I could tell you which hotels are going to be the best locations, best quality, but depending on your budget, that'll maximize your budget. I try to plan hotels that always give them breakfast included. Yeah. One meal a day is already taken care of. Yeah. Eat big for breakfast and maybe have a gelato at lunch and eat a big dinner, whatever your stomach feels like. But at least one meal's included, so you know that. You can start with a little coffee. I include tours, but I also encourage them to take time to just wander. So I'll give them suggested restaurants, that I've been to that I know are reasonably priced but good. I like to encourage them to go to the locals restaurants. Never do the tourist stuff because that's going to cost more and the quality's not there. So when they go, I've got a complete package for them. All they do is walk out the door. They have everything paid for, everything laid out. All they have to do is follow the instructions and go, which is nice. And that I think makes it so much easier, especially if they're not people who travel frequently. But even if they are, now a lot of my clients are repeats or referrals. They've gotten spoiled by that. And they know I'm just going to tell Sandy what I want. She's going to get it all figured out for me. And I'm just going to go. It's going to work out just
Hallelujah.
Fine. Right? Well, and why not? Take that stress off their plates. They've got enough on their plate. They don't need to be stressing about reading TripAdvisor reviews on hotels and trying to decide if they're fake reviews or real reviews.
I think the whole like finding the locals places is a big key. And if you anytime you can have somebody help you do that, it's great.
Yep.
Because it's harder and harder to find. We're at Trafalgar Square, and I look across the way, and there's a line around the corner for people to get into Wingstop, and I'm like, oh my, Wingstop,
right? Really? Or Five Guys Burgers and Fries in downtown Paris, really?
Right. I'm like, I guess I do like Five Guys, but I don't need to eat
Not in Paris.
Not in Paris.
No. So finding the more off the beaten path places is
that's what I always encourage people to do. So yeah, that's how I like to plan it, and it stays, it's been fun, and most of my business now is repeat clients and then referrals. It just stays so busy from that.
Right. So you're a little bit higher on that luxury end, really, is where you're kind of at for planning purposes.
Exactly. And I'm definitely moving my business more that direction, but I have 2 assistants that still help me and focus on, and I don't want to use the word non-luxury, but the more general travel. So the all-inclusives in Mexico is a big one, right? Yeah. So I have 2 assistants that's what they do for me. The baseline cruise lines like Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, they sell those for me. I work on the high-end ones. We do a lot of Hawaii, things along those lines that aren't necessarily or don't have to be luxury particularly, but there's still a huge market for luxury. And the reason I find myself moving that way is really just to service that market, and also to stretch myself and learn new things and do new things myself. Yeah. And that's a good way to do that. So, but then I bring on my assistants and groom them by starting with some of the easier to book things.
So then how do people find you?
Ooh, how do they find me? Well, it started with the book, and a lot of book signings. I do a lot of presentations. That's a big thing I like to do in the community. I haven't done as many as I'd like to recently, but I do like to give presentations. Just to talk to people about travel, tell them stories about different countries. Recently I did one at the Windsor Rotary about Africa, for an example.
Nice.
I like to just go do free presentations for folks. But then they find me through social media. They find me online. If you Google travel agents in Windsor, Colorado, I'm probably about the first one to come up.
What's your website?
Andagio.com.
How do you spell that?
ANDAGGIO.com. My clients leave me reviews, and that, posts out there on my travel profile, which is accessible on the web, and I get a lot from that. Referrals, lots and lots of referrals, repeat clients, just people I know and tell people about us, and it just grows.
Nice. All right. Well, I think this has been great. So
I love this stuff. So
yeah,
yes.
I love it. I think we also nerd about it. I thought we did a really good job of restraining, just not telling all our nerdy travel stories.
I know, right? I actually had more about Sandy. I did hold back because there's a really good one in Africa, but
oh boy,
we'll save it for one on one.
There you go.
I kind of think I know that one. Sometimes travel can be disappointing.
Well, Sandy, really want to appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise and all of that. And I'm sure there'll be a link to your website on the description of the episode and all of that. But I think this is great. And I think if people start thinking about just even the whole idea of investing in memories, that in your portfolio of investing in things, the idea of investing in experiences and memories is a big one.
Yes, it is.
They will last far beyond the experience. So,
I agree. Thank you.
Yes, thanks you.
Yeah,
right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Roy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everybody out there listening to the About Podcast. We'll be back in a couple of weeks again with something new and interesting, I have no doubt. Thanks for joining us.
There you go.
That was fun.
CWA is a Securities and Exchange Registered Investment Advisor. No content contained herein should be construed as an offer for investment advice or an offer for the purchase or sale of any security, insurance, or other investment product. Investments involve the risk of low loss, including loss of principal. Please consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before implementing any strategy presented here. Data presented here are obtained from believed reliable sources but cannot be guaranteed as to completeness or accuracy.